A young girl wakes up in the morning. As she stares at the ceiling, a man narrates, "You'd think after all this time, this would feel less like a hangover. Maybe she was drunker than I thought." The girl looks over, and a decayed corpse of another woman is lying next to her. The girl's chest is also splattered with blood. She gets up and walks over to the mirror to examine herself. As she looks closer, she sees cuts and marks on her body. A bloody knife lies on the floor. The girl is kneeling beside a bathtub, using tools to hack away at the body. The narrator continues that he knows how this looks and what everyone must be thinking. But there comes a point where survival becomes just another job. As the narrator continues, the girl wipes showers and walks into her room, where filled black garbage disposal bags lie in a corner. The girl sets fire to the garbage bags, shovels the ashes up, and dumps them in a barn. The narrator continues about how survival is lonely, but that he knows love exists. He has felt it, he says, but never his. Only for other people. Next, the girl is sitting in a cafe, having breakfast, repeating her name and introduction to herself, Emily Roberts. The narrator goes on to say that one night, someone finally shows up, and he can see that the love in their eyes is only for him. Emily comes back home and walks into the kitchen. She toys around with a baggie before smoking what looks like some wacky tobacco on the couch and enjoying jazz. She fidgets with a marble and is interrupted by her boyfriend, who walks into the kitchen to tell her that he has been looking for her everywhere, and the police are inquiring about her. The narrator says that there is a method to the process. When he is with them, he lives with them. He says most people can't tell. At that moment, Emily's boyfriend grabs his phone. When Emily asks who he is calling, he says he is calling the police to inform them that she is back. Tension escalates between the two as James, Emily's boyfriend, reveals that she has been missing for 3 days. Emily tries to reassure him and tries to initiate intimacy, but James promptly stops her and continues to call. Emily asks him to stop multiple times and grabs the corkscrew on the kitchen counter. She stabs James in the neck as a fountain of blood spurts forward. As James spitters and gags, the narrator says that he is not proud of doing this. Emily wraps James's body in garbage bags and drags it downstairs to the laundry room. She washes her clothes, mops the floor, and takes a pill. The next morning, Emily is in the bathroom brushing her teeth. As she observes the marks on her body beginning to darken, the narrator says that sometimes he forgets. But then the rot comes in 6 hours, give or take, and reality hits him again. He continues, saying that as a kid, a body lasted a year, but it had sped up over time. The narrator continues, saying that she should have lasted longer. He explains that when he has time to plan, he tends to choose carefully, but other times he just tends to rush. At that moment, there is a knock on the door, and a detective inquires about James. The detective, Detective Ransom, continues to ask Emily when she came back, and if she has seen James. She says no, but Detective Ransom insists on looking inside. Emily asks him to sit and brings him coffee. As Detective Ransom asks Emily where she has been, Emily pauses before clutching the detective's wrists in a deathly grip. He chokes, his skin stiffening, and blue veins shooting across his face. The detective's corpse is lying nude and lifeless, and another Detective Ransom stands in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. "Hi, my name is Detective Freddy. Detective Freddy Ransom," he says. It appears that whoever was once Emily has shapeshifted into the body of Detective Ransom. In a frenzy, the shapeshifted Freddy Ransom gathers a tarp, duct tape, and a hammer in a bag. He proceeds to knock the teeth from the body, pour gasoline all over it, and exit the house. A delivery man catches him by surprise and tries to stop him. Freddy sets fire to the house, gets in the detective's car, and drives off in a panic. That same night, as Freddy drives around, the narrator continues, saying that there have been a few tricks he has picked up along the way. He elaborates that painkillers and antibiotics slow the rotting process, whereas cocaine speeds it up. Freddy finds a dealer in a sketchy back alley and takes cocaine from him. Next, we see him parked near the edge of the bridge in the rain as he snorts lines of cocaine. The narrator says that in his quietest moments, his thoughts always turn to her. Then Freddy pulls up to a bar and exits the car. He walks in and meets eyes with a girl sitting at the counter, working on her laptop. Freddy buys her a drink, and they banter and flirt back and forth. The girl calls Jen, the bartender, to be a witness to whether she would continue talking to Freddy. The girl, Julia, introduces herself to Freddy as he assures Jen he's a cop, not a creep, and shows off his badge. He tells Julia he finds her to be the most interesting thing in the room, as the narrator continues to say that she is the only one who matters. They talk and laugh, and as the night goes on, they eventually find themselves in a back alley, making out. Suddenly, a sharp pain in Freddy's sides causes him to scream out in agony. When Julia asks him if he's okay, he shouts at her to leave as he grips his sides and struggles to keep walking. Freddy writhes in pain as he walks from car to car, eventually finding an elderly gentleman and a young woman sitting in a parked car. He uses his badge to intimidate the girl into leaving and asks the gentleman to move to the passenger side seat. The gentleman, thinking he was being charged with breaking the law, begs for mercy and explains his wife and kids are expecting him. Freddy tells him that he needs to do this or else he will die. He tells the man he is sorry and clutches his wrists. Next, we see the shapeshifter in his new body, in a tarp jacket, hammer in hand, hovering over a body. He is jolted by a phone call. The name on the screen reads Mary, suggesting the gentleman's wife has finally called. As the shapeshifter pulls up to the gentleman's house, the narrator comments that people who live in such houses fear change and stay there for a lifetime. He admits that seeing this made him wish he had it too. The shape-shifted gentleman attempts to sneak into the house, but is met by his wife sitting in the living room. As she sees him, she storms off. The gentleman makes himself a drink. As he heads to the bedroom, he stops to peer at the young daughter, asleep in her bedroom. He enters the room and puts on his wedding ring before he undresses to get into bed next to his wife, who is wide awake. The next morning, the young daughter wakes him up by jumping on top of him. Frustrated, he yells at her, and the young girl runs off to her mother to complain about daddy's foul language. As he finds his way to the kitchen, the wife asks him to join them for breakfast. The pain on the side resurfaces as he grabs his side and says he is running late for work. As he walks towards the reception desk at work, a flashback shows the girl in the car with him. The man, whose name is Sam, is seen trying to kiss her. She stops him and says he is her boss and her friend, but nothing more. In the present, the same girl, wearing a nurse uniform, stands at the reception. She asks Sam, aka Dr. Richardson, how he is doing, and tells him that his first patient is waiting for him. In the operation theater, Sam puts on his gloves, chipper than ever, and asks the patient, Tim, how he is doing. As he gives the boy anesthesia, he smiles and tells him this isn't the first time he has been a dentist. As the boy's mother comes to pick him up, the narrator says that the routine was hard to keep up with and drained the spirit. He says he needs breaks. Next, we see the man enjoying his breakfast in the same cafe as before, smiling cheerfully. Suddenly, he jumps up and rushes out as a woman with hair similar to Julia's walks by. He rushes to a cab and asks the driver to follow her car. The driver refuses and says it's incredibly suspicious. A disappointed Sam exits the car and watches Julia drive off, as the narrator says that he has been trying to find her new address for a year. Then Sam sits in a movie theater, eating popcorn and laughing aloud, as the narrator shares how movies and being in a dark cinema has always healed him and quiets the voices. Just then, a man from the back row shouts at Sam to shut up and throws a bag of popcorn at him. Sam seems puzzled, more than annoyed. Soon it is Christmas. Later that night, we see Sam seated at the dinner table with them, distressed as they all tell stories. Soon after, he is back at the bar, toying with the same marble Emily was playing with. The narrator says he only has one tangible thing left of his true family. The rest was all memory. Just then, Julia walks to the bar and asks Sam if she saw him there last night with a younger girl. Sam says he didn't know what he was thinking, and it was a lapse of judgment. He says he doesn't intend to do it again, and just needed an escape from his family sometimes. A flashback shows Sam driving off as his wife shouts out in his kids' watch. In the present, Julia says that if Sam loved them, he should always go back to them. She continues to tell Sam about her husband and young son. She talks about how her 3-year-old son, Taylor, developed a whooping cough a few years ago and passed away. She continues that being alone with her husband, Richard, made things hard. But one day, Richard decided to set up a date for them. The date went beautifully, but when she awoke later that night, Richard was gone. A flashback shows Richard and Julia lying next to each other. Eventually, Richard is in the doorway, looking back at her before walking out. In the present, Julia reflects that it may have been too much for him, and the date may have been his way of saying a proper goodbye. She sobs and Sam offers to buy her the next drink. She thanks him and asks him why he needed to escape. Sam says it is because he is afraid and does not know what he will do if he escapes. He wonders if this is what is best for the children. Julia asks him if he thinks he is a good person, and Sam says that he tries, but wonders if being a good person even really matters. The narrator wonders if he even considers himself a person. Later, Sam is in the bathroom, observing his wounds. He smiles at Julia and leaves. He then sits in a motel room bed, flipping through the channels. He gets up and snorts more cocaine, as the narrator explains that even though the cocaine sped up the decaying process, it still had its own effects. Sam calls the girl from the clinic and begs her to come over. She tries to refuse, but Sam begs her, saying he needs a friend. When she comes over, she finds Sam lying on the bed curled up. He calls out to the girl, Rachel, and she comes closer. The narrator comments on how this time, it hurt more than ever and felt like he was dying. Rachel's rotting corpse lays on the bed as the shapeshifter takes over her body. The shape-shifted Rachel burns the corpse and dumps the ashes in the barn. She is almost caught by the neighbor, who thinks it is a man named Frank. As Rachel panics and leaves, the neighbor Colleen keeps calling out, asking if she's Frank's granddaughter. Rachel drives to the clinic and shoves as many antibiotics into her bag as she can. She walks out, but not before flipping off the nurse on duty. Next, Rachel comes home and calls out to her husband. Noticing he's not home, she opens the bag and guzzles antibiotics. Later that night, Rachel makes her way to the bar and finds Julia there. When she introduces herself, however, she says her name is Drew. They talk and laugh, and caught in a moment, Rachel, now Drew, almost reveals her real age. Julia gives Drew her card and offers to call her up anytime. The conversation is interrupted by a young man who sits next to Drew and tries to chat her up. Drew's attention is elsewhere as she watches Julia walk over to an older bearded man and sit next to him. Exasperated, Drew looks around and her eye catches a police sketch being shown on TV of Rachel. She excuses herself and goes to the bathroom, does a key and comes out. She asks the man if he wants to leave, and soon they are back home, getting down. The narrator comments that he has been a woman enough times to not be fazed by this. The narrator is revealed to be Drew, a shape-shifting entity who uses other people's bodies to keep himself alive. Drew is in love with Julia and has been trying to find a way to be with her. However, his host bodies don't have a very long life, as the rot follows Drew to each next body. In the present, Drew and Rachel's body backs away as a sharp pain stings Rachel's neck. He decides to offer the guy coke, to which he agrees. However, things take a turn for the worse as the guy becomes aggressive and refuses to stop when he asks. As he pins Rachel's body down, Drew throws him off and rushes to grab a knife. They continue to fight, and he struggles down the stairs. But Drew stabs the man to death. Panicked, Drew packs his bag and rushes to leave the apartment. As he runs down the stairs, he sees a woman has spotted the man's body. She tells Drew the police are on their way, and Drew runs out to escape. As the police surround the area, Drew hides. The next morning, Rachel's boyfriend, who has ended up following her, finds her hiding and begins to scream at her. Drew runs from him and hides in the back of a pickup truck. He pulls out Julia's card and realizes that he could not keep this up much longer. He decides to tell Julia the truth. He follows Julia and finds her with the older gentleman from the bar. He follows them as her body continues to rot faster. As the man and Julia go their separate ways, he follows the man to his apartment and takes over his body. Now in Robert's body, Drew calls Julia to tell her he had a great time and asks to meet her somewhere private. He goes to her place and watches Julia dance, mesmerized. As they drink, Drew makes his move. As Drew and Julia make love, she notices a bandage on his side, which he dismisses. Soon, Julia and Robert start dating, and as time goes on, they share many blissful moments together. During that time, Drew goes back to the apartment and dumps Robert's body in a forest near the dam. He narrates that he knew nothing was permanent and everything was only short-lived. A news report begins to surface about the ashes found on the barn. Julia watches and tells Robert she recognized the victims from the bar, but Robert reassures her that there is nothing to worry about. One day, the pain of Drew's injury resurfaces as he and Julia get ready to go out. When Julia tries to ask, he asks if she trusts him. They sit, and Drew tells her the truth. He recounts that at 12, he was responsible for killing his mother. He did not know what he was and said it was an accident, Julia reassures him, and Drew mentions it was 1954. A puzzled Julia tries to make sense of what is happening, and Drew continues to tell her that he fell in love with her through her husband Richard and took over his body. He feels terrible about leaving her and wanted to make things right, which is why he kept meeting her through all the people at the bar. Julia cries, stunned, and tries to leave, but Robert pins her down. She screams as Drew takes over her body. Drew, in Julia's body, sits over her corpse and weeps. He says all he wanted was to get close to her. He goes to the bar and thanks Jen for taking care of her, aka Julia. He says he spent his whole life looking for answers, but knew at the end he was the only one who could stop this. Drew returns to the motel room and lies on the bed after taking cocaine. However, instead of dying, Julia's body morphs into an embryo-like sac, and an old man breaks out of it. Drew looks at himself in the mirror, mortified that he didn't die. He reflects and says that our choices leave echoes, and the guilt of our actions lives on inside us. The end. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like our channel and subscribe if you enjoy content like this. Also, let us know what movie you would love us to recap for you.